Peter Erskine, how you doing?
Doing fine. Thank you, Scotty.
Hi, thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate you taking the time out.
My great pleasure. I didn't, the way my audio is set up, I didn't hear the theme song. What were you playing?
It's an original. I having issues with running OBS, which is the software I'm using, and also sending my computer's audio to Zoom. So it doesn't send my end to you, but I made a remix of an Ariana Grande song, and I really liked my the instrumental that I made, and I last minute needed some form of intro music for this podcast, and then I basically just took out all of the copywritten stuff, and I'm using just the stuff I made, because the original one had I have a bunch of stems from old Michael Jackson tunes, and I took the percussion part from, I think it was Don't Stop Till You Get Enough. And so I had to take that out, unfortunately, but it works and well for this.
Well, good. Anyways, sorry I wasn't quite at attention, but now you have my attention. And happy Saturday to you. How's the weather in Brooklyn?
It's really warm. It's surprisingly humid too, I've noticed, which I don't mind, because it's been really dry and cold the last couple of weeks, but basically the last 4 days it's been surprisingly warm, which I like. Where are you right now? Are you in LA?
Santa Monica.
Santa Monica.
The weather's been a little bit wacky here. Some surprisingly cold and windy mornings and nights, but spring has almost sprung.
Mm-hmm.
I always loved spring back east. I grew up in New Jersey, about 2 hours south or so from where you are right now.
Okay.
Near the Jersey Shore. Exit 36 on the Garden State Parkway. It's always fun to go back and visit. It's been a while, and I don't normally even get the opportunity. And of course now, since we're well over a year into this lockdown, I haven't traveled anywhere.
Yeah. Well, when was the last time you got to go back to Jersey?
It was, time. It's hard to keep track, but I think it was about 4 years ago. A very talented vocalist named Dave Damiani, along with a great lead trumpet player, Bijan Watson. They were kind of hosting this series of concerts dedicated, or the theme had something to do with the memory of an old club in Atlantic City. It was the premier nightclub at one point. It was called the 500 Club.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of wise guys, I think, used to hang out at that club. But it's where Jerry Lewis and Dean Martin formed their partnership, which was these might be a pair of names that most of your listeners may not be familiar with. But when I was growing up, Dean Martin and Jerry Lewis, it was a terrific comedy team. They made a lot of movies, and they had a live show. So, my early education in drumming, my teacher Johnny Severa was, did a lot of show drumming, and so I learned how to read from pretty early on. In fact, I have a photo here of myself and Johnny. That's when I was 6 years old.
Oh.
He's conducting the band. This was a benefit for the Musicians Union in Atlantic City, and if you look down at the bottom of the front bass drum hoop there, you can see my father's hand. He came up and he saw the bass drum was starting to move on that slippery stage floor. So anyway, always good memories of Atlantic City and the folks there.
What'd your parents do when you were a kid?
Well, my father was a psychiatrist, but he had been a bass player in college, and that's how he worked his way through college and medical school, playing the bass. And I was the one of four children. I was the youngest, who just really seemed to take to music. And my mother raised the four of us, and she was a wonderful woman. and my dad was a wonderful guy, and I had a couple of wonderful sisters and brother who not only tolerated but really encouraged my drumming. And as many of you, I'm sure, can imagine, practicing in a house before going to school uh, early in the morning. Um, took a lot of forbearance, and they were really great. I was very lucky. I mean, I think that's one of the key elements, uh, is having the encouragement and support within the home.
Yeah. Did you ever want to become a psychiatrist like your father?
I had thought of becoming a medical doctor,
Hmm.
and he would point to the example of Denny Zeitlin, who was a tremendous jazz pianist who's still around, and a practicing psychiatrist. Um, so for a minute, I thought I might want to do that, but just the attraction of spending all my time playing was more interesting to me than anything else. But I think I picked up one good thing, one valuable thing, and that's that the ethos of do no harm.
Hmm.
That's part of the Hippocratic oath. Uh, Hippocratic as in Hippocrates, um, and I think that's a good way to go through life. So to do your best to do no harm to others.
Hmm. And you started playing drums, what, around the age 4, right about then?
4 or 5. I started taking lessons when I was 5,
Gotcha.
and with Johnny, and that was one of the other key factors, at least as far as my musical development went, was finding a teacher who was uh, empathetic, someone I really looked up to. He was the guy I wanted to be when I grew up. Johnny was just very cool and a really good drummer, and um, he was more interested in teaching me how to be a good all round drummer as opposed to how to be a soloist,
Hmm.
say. Um, One of the drummers that he uh, talked to me about quite often was Saul Gubin, and Saul was the quintessential studio drummer in New York, who later became the quintessential studio drummer in Los Angeles.
Hmm.
Um, in addition to drummers like Shelly Manne and of course Mel Lewis and Art Blakey, Max Roach, Buddy Rich, of course. I don't think any drummer of my generation could possibly have um, not been inspired by Buddy Rich or wowed by him. But Buddy's drumming was so snare drum centric and so amazing. And there was an album called Rich versus Roach. It was Buddy and Max. And the first tune is Sing Sing Sing,
Yeah,
the
of
tune that
course.
Gene Krupa made so famous. So uh, both drummers and both of their combos are playing. The first solo is Buddy Rich, and right out of the gate, he's just tearing it up, doing great Buddy Rich snare drum centric type stuff. Um, and then it's Max's turn, and Max plays a solo with walking bass accompaniment, and it's like a tenor saxophone solo or something. And when I heard the two side by side um, in the one song, I immediately identified with the Max Roach thing. I could do that, and I like that. The Buddy thing. How do you imagine or conjure being able to do that when you're a little kid? So as inspiring as it was always kind of like from another planet for me.
How old were you when that
Whereas
happened specifically? That thing
I
about.
was that album, I was probably 6 or 7. I got exposed to it pretty early on, and and then not too long after that was hearing Joe Morello and his solo, very melodic solo on Dave Brubeck's recording of Take Five, which was composed by Paul Desmond. Um, very very much inspired by the way Max Roach played. Um, so again, here were melodies being played on the drums. So I like that,
Mhm.
and that became uh, uh, more of a guiding force than the the Buddy Rich type of model of drumming. And I loved Buddy, and I loved his band, and I'm happy to go on record as saying he's the greatest drummer that ever lived.
Hmm.
Um, Whatever your style is, it was just no denying Buddy was like the Paganini
Hmm.
of the drums. Um, but he's not a drummer that I based my ultimate drumming style on. I was just more drawn to drummers like Don Lamond and Mel Lewis, and then Roy Haynes and Grady Tate, and then eventually Elvin Jones, and then Tony and Jack and so many players. Now, if any of our viewers here are on Facebook, you may have come across something that I've been doing called the Infinity Drummers List, and if not, I'm collaborating right now with the good people at Modern Drummer. We're going to try to find a way to make this some sort of publication. E as an electronic, so that you don't need to be a Facebook pal of mine to get access to this stuff. But I was nominated. It was one of those Facebook posts. Antonio Sanchez, a good friend and an amazing drummer, and Antonio said, today is day number 6, and I nominate Peter Erskine to list 10 drummers in 10 days. And so I thought, well, okay, and then by the 10th day, I was so annoyed at that artificial limitation. I said, you know what? I'm going to start over. And I'm going to do 50 drummers. So I start with the great Mickey Roker, and I'm looking to be DJ, which is always fun. But list things that I like. Not the disclaimer. These aren't the most famous performances by these drummers. Many of these drummers are not the most famous drummers, and it may not be the most important work they ever did, but it's something I like. Mm-hmm. So several days in, I'm like 50 drummers. It needs to be a longer list. 100 drummers. And then a few days into that, I decided to, I had to name it something else, so I came up, just kind of spur of the moment, Infinity Drummers list, which was the inspiration for that came from an old Pee Wee Herman film, where Pee Wee Herman's a grown man, of course, but he's playing like this young or infantile guy, and they get into this. He and this friend or arch nemesis. I know you are, but what am I? I know you are, but what am I? I know you are, but what am I? And then Pee Wee goes, infinity. So I thought, well, good. The infinity kind of covers. So now I'm up to, I think today was 234. I'm gonna stop at on 300 on day 365. Mm-hmm. So we'll make it like a drummer a day for 1 year.
Well, I'll link to that in the description. So it's not there right now, but when you guys watch the replay, I'll have that up there.
Okay. Yeah, it's great fun, and if anyone wants a link to the Google sheet, I've copied all the content from every single Facebook post into this Google sheet document. So before it goes commercial, you can be part of this underground celebration of great drumming.
Yeah, and so you say that you think Buddy Rich is the greatest drummer. You said some of these people on your list are not, the most famous. Out of the people on that list, who do you think is the best and is really underappreciated or didn't get that, public success that they deserved?
Well, there's no aside from Buddy, and I could maybe talk about Louis Bellson's hands. It's all purely subjective. There's no best, mm-hmm. And in fact, what the list I think sheds a light on is that you don't need to be one of those top 20 drummers to have been acknowledged or to be acknowledged. Like, wow, that's some great drumming. Mm-hmm. So just the other day, I highlighted the drumming of Dave Getz. He was the drummer in Big Brother and the Holding Company, and they backed up Janis Joplin. Mm-hmm. And it led to our meeting one another on Facebook and exchanging some nice messages. This morning it was the great Kenny Washington. A couple days ago it was Lewis Nash. I started off with Mickey Roker, and shortly after that I had Ozzie Johnson. Um, and then of course you have to list Buddy, and you have to list Louis Bellson. Um, for Louis, I listed uh, I think it was Skin Deep, for, the recording he made with the Duke Ellington Orchestra. So some stuff's historical, and some stuff's obscure, and some stuff is, well, of course. Um, for Steve Gadd, I think I chose a track from a Warren Bernhardt album that's out of print, but it's just really great drumming, and I still love to listen to it. So I'm not going to give you any. I'm not going to give you any best apologies.
It's okay.
They're all great.
Gotcha. All great. And so going back to when you were a kid, you got into drums really early, and you said at some point you were considering being a medical doctor. What were your really other main interests as a child? What are the things that you were doing besides drumming, or was that like basically all of your time?
That was pretty much it. I mean, I played baseball. I wasn't very good. At some point, I acquired the nickname Butterfingers, so that gives you a clue how good I was. It's a bit unfair because I loved baseball, and I was pretty good at it, I thought. When I was trying out for a little league team one year, I got hit right between the eyes with a line drive, and that made me a bit. I got a concussion, and so that made me a bit ball shy. Afterwards. To the point that there was a game of frisbee catch going on during a weather report rehearsal in one of these large sound stages. And I think it was either Joe or Jocko threw it at me really fast. And, I didn't want to get hit in the head, but I also didn't want to jam a finger. Here I am. I'm just starting off with weather reports. So the last thing I'm going to do is risk jamming a finger. So I when I saw how fast it was coming, I avoided it. And she mentioned it in some book or interview that I was scared of this frisbee that came sailing my way, and how Joe and Jocko were so effortless in catching it without fear. And you know what? It was my first day or first couple of days of weather report. I'd probably do the same thing again. I always err on the side of caution. But I was very interested in classical music. So here's a photo of me from the Interlochen Arts Academy, and that was my freshman year in high school. I'm the one with the smarmy expression. So I took mallet lessons and studied playing timpani. And loved being part of. I always like being part of something that's bigger than myself. I think that's why I was kind of an incurable romantic as a young man. I loved that feeling of falling in love, because you just get lost in this thing that's bigger than anything you can imagine, right? Mm-hmm. I loved being in orchestras. The girl violin players were also so cute. I just loved sitting there looking at them, and I loved all these young people putting all this energy together and playing the music of whether it was Debussy or Strauss or Mahler. Like, wow, this is something else. So even though the percussion parts in concert band were generally, there were more notes you could play. I got to play enough notes being a jazz drummer, so orchestra was always a real treat for me.
Did you ever get a chance to go out with any of those violin players?
I don't talk about but yes, I did.
Good for you.
At some point, my first girlfriend was a singer, and she's still a wonderful singer, and we're still in touch, which is nice.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, well, I have an amazing wife that puts up with that. And, now, I met my wife by way of music. She was the interpreter on the very first trip I made with Weather Report. This was in June of 1978. I don't think she'll mind if I share this photo of her. There she is with Joe Zawinul,
Yeah.
and we're at I think it was Radio FM or
Hmm.
Tokyo FM Tokyo. That's what it was called. Tokyo FM Tokyo
It
radio
was this.
station.
So were you guys touring the Mr. Gone record around this point?
The Mr. Gone had not been released yet, but it was a tour of Japan that had been booked, and they needed a drummer, and that's why I got the call.
Hmm.
They Alex Acuna had left the band, and I did some recording on Mr. Gone right before we went to Japan, and then when we came back, I think it was after we came back from Japan. Now you know what, I can't remember, but I tracked the one tune that I'm on, which is Pinocchio,
Hmm.
and then I'm pretty sure that was after we'd come back from Japan, and then we toured Mr. Gone in the fall of 1978.
Hmm.
The album was just coming out, and I've still got a couple of those tour jackets from the '78 tour, and they say Mr. Gone on them.
Are you nostalgic like that? Do you like to keep a bunch of old memorabilia from tours and sessions and stuff?
I was always pretty good at documenting
Hmm.
stuff. I've been a pack rat. I've kept way too many things, more things than maybe I should have uh, kept. But I was a bit of a photo historian or documentarian. So whatever band I was in, I would take photos, and uh, being one of the musicians, even if another band was playing, it was always, generally I had permission to be on stage taking photos.
Hmm.
The musicians knew me, and they didn't mind. And I tried never to be too obnoxious. And there are a lot of things I didn't manage to get photos of, but there are enough things I managed to take photos of. And for almost all those tours, and in the recording studio, nobody was taking photos. I mean, Weather Report, that Wayne wasn't interested in taking photos, and neither was Joe Zawinul, and neither was Jocko.
Hmm.
But I would take photos, and then I'd print the photos up and send them to the guys in a little photo album each Christmas.
Hmm.
And they enjoyed that. I know that they liked that. But that wasn't their thing. So, yeah, that's primarily the memorabilia. I saved a few shirts. My wife and my daughter like to wear them on occasion. Some pretty rare Weather Report tour shirts. The band didn't do much, or if anything, in the way of merchandise. But oftentimes, a local concert promoter somewhere would print up shirts, kind of, and give them to the band and crew or whatever.
Hmm. When did you first start making money professionally as a drummer? Was that pre-college? Like real, like
Yeah,
where you could actually live?
I was 14. I lied about my age and started working in Atlantic City during the summers, and that was just a couple of gigs. But the first gig, my brother drove me. I grew up in a small town named Linwood, New Jersey, and that was, usually about a 20-minute drive to Atlantic City. It was summertime. The traffic was really bad, and it's taking over an hour to get there. So we didn't leave early enough. I didn't have cases for my hardware. I had it all in a big sack. I'd never done a gig. I played the drums, but I'd never done a gig, and it's in a ballroom at this hotel, and the band's up on the stage, and I show up late, and we're dragging stuff through the audience, and I set up, and the here by the way, here's the drum set in question. There I am with it. It's now in a museum in Hungary, just outside of Budapest.
Mm.
Um,
How are you showing me that? You have a control deck next to you, like an ATEM Mini or something?
yeah, I have two ATEMs, in
Oh,
fact.
I'm jealous. I want one of those so badly. I was just curious.
I've got I've got one ATEM, and then I piggybacked another one.
Okay.
I have a pair of monitors. I have one iPad for music, one for visual stuff. This is I've got cameras all over the place,
Hmm.
and I'll give you a tour of that in a bit. Sorry for the messy camera work.
It's okay.
Anyway, so back to the that thing. So I show up late, and the band leader was a gentleman named Jack Lewis. He owned a music store in town, and at the end of the set, he I got one of those little
Oh God.
summoning fingers, and he gestured to a chair. No, and he was a bit stern, but in a soft voice and a rather loving delivery. I think he said, Peter, he said, you must always be set up and ready to play 15 minutes before the downbeat.
What are you thinking when he's telling you this? Are you sweating bullets?
No, I said, you're absolutely right. I apologize. Never been late for a gig since.
Yeah, I've always been interested in those types of things where it's like one major event or just one person doing something can affect the way you live for the rest of your life. It's incredible
Yeah,
sometimes.
yeah, and he didn't. That was the end of it, and he said, "Okay, good," and he dropped it.
Mhm.
Speaking of dropping it, then the trumpet player, I had this amazing like 17 and a half inch K ride, and I didn't have cases for anything, and this guy dropped it down a circular flight of like stone or cement stairs at the
Oh,
entrance of the hotel. Um, and it, yeah, took a chunk out of the edge, and that cymbal was never quite the same. Uh, it's too bad, but uh, eventually I got bags for my drums. I got a drum kit. I don't know if I have a photo of me. Oh yeah, here it is. Here's one when I was. All right, so I'll just give you the photo tour for a minute. Okay, so there I am with my teacher Johnny Severa. There I am at the summer music camp
uh-huh.
in 1961, playing that same camp. That's Lewis Hayes, who was the drummer with Cannonball Adderley. 1962, that's Donald Byrd playing the trumpet. A couple of years later with Oliver Nelson. I was very lucky. That's Ron Carter. We're remembering those days at camp. Um, and there I am with my new kit. So instead of the Gretsch Red Sparkle, I got this Ludwig kit, and that was my gigging kit. That's Bob Mintzer and myself in high school. There we are, of course, a couple years ago. And there I am when I joined the Kenton band. I was a young hippie
Hmm.
and still had that Ludwig kit. I took off the bottom heads, and of course Mel Lewis read me the riot act when
Were we just trying to deaden the
um,
kick drum?
oh yeah, it was rock and roll back then. It was rock and roll. There's me
Hell
and
yeah.
Jocko. Um, another shot of me and Jocko with that's Joni Mitchell and Herbie Hancock. That was also the summer of 1978. So a lot happened between 1972 when I joined the Kenton band, and 6 years later I was lucky enough to get that opportunity to play with Weather Report.
What?
And anyway, my first gig was so if I was 14, that was 1968.
Cool. What made you decide to go to Indiana University for school? You went to study percussion, right?
Yeah, it was the great music school. David Baker was the director of the jazz program there, but it was primarily because of the percussion instructor George Gaber, and I had met him by way of one of the summer music camps a few years earlier, and nowadays when I'm auditioning students as a professor at the Thornton School of Music at the University of Southern California, that's one of the questions. How many schools have you applied to? And so I'll say, 9. I say, wow, it's different because I applied to one school.
That's what I did too. I'm
Right?
just about to graduate. You know the new school in the West Village in New York?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. I my whole plan was I just wanted to go to New York City. That was like my big thing. I was just like, I gotta go to New York.
Where are you from originally?
I'm from Central New York, about 5 hours up from here, and I just was
Okay.
enamored with New York my whole life, and it was the
Of
place to
course.
go. And so yeah, I applied to one college, and honestly, in retrospect, looking, I'm thinking like, well, what the hell would I have done if I didn't get in? But that wasn't my thing. It was just like, this is where I want to go, and if it doesn't happen, I'll figure it out. So you had a similar experience?
Yeah, so I mean, I didn't even worry about what if I don't get in. I knew my grades were good enough, and I knew he was going to accept me. Um, and then my audition for the jazz band, uh, David Baker, I went to his office, and I had met him at a summer camp before, so he knew me a little bit. Uh, and he asked me to go with him to this room where there was a drum set. And it's funny. All I remember, I don't even know if he asked me to play time, but he he put um, he put a bebop tune in front of me. It might have been like "Scrapple from the Apple" anyway, some Charlie Parker tune.
Hmm.
And he said, "Play that." So I played it, and he said, "Cool." He said, "Play something in 11." So I played something in 11, and he said, "All right, thanks." I got the gig. So, and Jeff Hamilton never forgave me because Jeff was also a freshman that year at Indiana. But we finally got over it, and we're
How long did that take?
no, pretty quick. I don't know why David even it gave me a private audition of sorts. So I think he was bending the rules a little bit, and you know I go through life thinking like a lot of I got here because there was a lot of bending of the rules going on, and I've just been really fortunate. And the only lesson, if I had to like parlay that into here's a teachable moment from it, was I always paid attention to
Hmm.
music. Um, I generally knew how to be prepared for an opportunity. Um, I was always enthusiastic. I was always grateful, and I was always polite.
Yeah.
And those are still essential ingredients. And the few times that when I would not have one of those parts, one of those ingredients, say, that'd be a mess up.
Hmm. Was there
So,
anything that you learned during your time in college that was really important but wasn't directly related to the curriculum? Just something that you learned just being there?
well, I mean, the most of the stuff I learned was from George Gaber.
Hmm.
You know, uh, various bits of advice. He one of the I'm just changing the program here. One of the okay, I'm going to the Hudson Music digital book
Cool.
library. So here we go. Um, we were working in Professor Gaber's studio on the Fred Albright Contemporary Studies for Snare Drum, and contemporary studies or contemporary etudes, I forget, but not easy stuff. Pretty complex and complicated. And he says, all right, let's you can close that book. He said, get out your Podemsky book, the Benjamin Podemsky Snare Drum Method, which was one that I had worked out of with him when I was in grade school. So I got it out of my percussion briefcase. Um, that's what everybody had back then. If you were a classical percussionist, you had that Samsonite briefcase that held your mallets and music. And he says, page 25, please. So page 25. And I go, wow, good. Quarter notes and eighth notes. And I'm thinking, bum, 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 bum. Gabriel's got his cigar, and he goes, you hear that? He goes, each one of those clicks is a measure. Now go. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, go. Ba-ba-da-ba-ba-da-ba-ba-da-ba-da-ba. And, by the second or third line, crash and burn.
Mm-hmm.
So he just kind of shakes his head, and he takes a puff on a cigar again, and he goes, come back next week, be able to play that or anything else in the book at that tempo with no mistakes. He said, now get out. That's it. He threw me out. So I thought, all right, how do you read music? And the cool thing about a teacher like Gabriel was if he trusted you could figure something out on your own, he'd put you in that raft.
Mm-hmm.
He'd put you in that lifeboat. Okay, figure this out. And I figured it out, and I became a very good reader. And in fact, New School, not to denigrate any course of study at New School, but I did a workshop there a few years ago,
Mm-hmm.
and I had this photocopied, and I passed it out, and I said, "All right, everyone, we're gonna, play it." And of course, it starts off unison, and then, and there was this kind of long-haired, bearded. I mean, he would have been right at home in the early '70s where I was going to school. But in the 10 years ago or 15 years, whatever, it wasn't that common of
Yeah.
thing. And this guy jumps up. Can I use a minor profanity on the show here?
Oh, I thought he said that. Yes, of course. You can say whatever you want.
Oh, okay. So he jumps up and he goes, "This is bullshit." I went, "What?" And I thought he was referring to this. He goes, "Bullshit what they're teaching us here." And because he was in some class for sight reading, and it was all like really super complicated stuff. 5:4/3 and all that kind of metric modulation stuff, and whether inspired by Zappa or Messiaen or Boulez or Verez or I don't know what, but he rightly advocated. Obviously, he beat me to it. This is what we're going to have to be able to read, and
Mm-hmm.
it's true. In 50 years that I've been working as a professional musician, I've run into quintuplets a couple times, but mainly it's quarter notes and eighth notes. But you need to be able to gobble them at very, very fast tempos. Some triplets, 16th notes. And so you learn to, you learn to always be reading ahead. You learn to go to the end of the bar and read backwards if you see a gobbledygook of rests in the middle, because you don't have time to count them.
Yeah.
And so you begin to recognize patterns, and also the thing that was tricky about this is that Benjamin Podemsky, whether by design or accident, there are 5 measures one line, 6 measures another line, and they're 4 or 8 bar phrases. So you don't start each line where your instinct wants it to start,
Mm-hmm.
and it makes it just that much trickier to keep reading. If anyone wants to be a professional musician, get the Modern Reading Text in 4/4 book by Louis Belson,
Mm-hmm.
and be able to eat that for breakfast. You have to own it. If you can play through that book without mistakes, you're a good reader, and it's fun. Occasionally I've seen the argument, you don't need to read, and Dennis Chambers doesn't read. I said, well, if you play like Dennis Chambers, then good for you. But you probably don't. Number one. Number two, I think Dennis does have reading skills more than he likes to let on.
Mm-hmm.
He also has amazing ears. All right. But why would anybody want to advocate or argue for being illiterate,
That's a good
whether
point.
musically or otherwise? It's just, what's the point in that?
I'm
I
really
don't need to read to whatever. I mean, okay, you're a Dumbo then. because
I'm really curious.
I'm talking about the language, but yeah, to in today's world to not read, I think, come on.
I'm really curious as to who that kid at the new school was studying with, because I studied for this guy named Amir Zeev, and he's the kind of guy who will throw the kitchen sink at you, but only at the point where he'll make you do something simple, and you'll see how well you do it, and then he'll speed it up, and then he always would do that thing where he'd go like this.
I was under the impression that this was a class. This was a class in reading. Like
there are at the new school. Right now there are two, but there are two separate sight reading drum classes. And I only took with this guy Amir, and his whole thing was like he would always give us incredibly difficult stuff, but his emphasis was like, this is just so when you get the stuff you're gonna get in real life, the easier stuff that you can go through anything. And he would always emphasize how important it is to play. I
don't agree with that. That for me that's like I warm up with metal sticks. So when I get a wood stick, no, that's not a good idea. And I met this teacher. He's a good guy. It's not like these are bad people, but I met a teacher who worked with my nephew. My nephew, hey, Uncle Peter, I started taking drum lessons. Oh, great. Yeah, I'm learning how to play samba rock beat in 7/4 or something. I said, okay, cool. I said, do you have your teacher's phone number?
Did you call the teacher and vibe him?
I didn't vibe him. I just said, I said, how many years I've been doing this, and I maybe twice I had to play some samba thing in 7. I said that's not what he needs to know right now, and it's a thing that schools like to do. They did it when I was in high school, and I had the best jazz band director. Mm-hmm. His name is Dave Sporney. He was wonderful. And he made sure we could play the basics, but we also liked to play the kind of novelty, gimmicky, big band tunes that made a good impression if you played a festival with your high school band, whatever. And so, for example, like some of the Gordon Goodwin charts will be like that, like Hunting Wabbits, and it's beautifully executed in the writing, and it's fun. And these are good skills, but if that same band is spending at least as much time playing some Ellington or Basie, then I'm all for it. But if they're only playing festival pieces, and they can't, and we had trouble, even though Sporney tried to give us an all round bass or background, having that much. That much dessert at the dining table, mm-hmm. It's hard to resist, and so I think sometimes you have to give a diet of just very basic stuff, mm-hmm. And that's what Gaber did with me. I mean, I went to Indiana. I was the hot shot out of high school. I played timpani in the orchestra. I won the concerto competition. I was the drummer in the jazz band, and I played a marimba solo. All this stuff. You know what I studied for a full year? And full year, I mean 2 semesters.
What'd you study? 4/4? Oh, drum pad.
Practice pad.
Yeah.
It's the best year of study I ever had.
Mm-hmm.
And he's just like, you're not ready. And when I went back after being on the road 3 years with the Kenton Band, guess what? It was practice pad, because he said, I don't like how hard you're hitting the instrument.
Yeah. What year did you graduate college?
Well, I went there 71, 72, because I got out of high school a year early. And that's why I was 18 when I joined the Kenton Band. After 3 years, not quite 3 years with Kenton, I went back to college in 1975 for 1 year, fully intending to finish. So I'm a 21-year-old sophomore at this point. So one concert, keep in mind, I left the gig to go back to school. Everyone else can't wait to get out of school,
Yeah.
to leave school so they can get the gig. And I was playing tempo blocks on a piece, and Kenny Aronoff, great drummer, and
Of
who
course.
played with every rock uh, uh, singer out there, I guess. Um, so Kenny was playing timpani. He was like he was the top star percussionist that year. Um, and there's some other really excellent percussionists who've all gone on to become professors at different colleges. And I'm like, so after the concert, Gabriel goes up to Kenny, goes, beautiful job, bravo, and shakes his hand and goes up to this other, beautiful job, bravo. And then he goes up to her, Judy, and goes, great job, bravo. Judy Moonert, who teaches at, I think, Western Michigan University now. And he gets to me, and I'm waiting for I'm just about to put my hand out. He goes, I want to see you in my office first thing tomorrow morning. Boom. So he kind of dissed me in front of everybody. I'm like, wow. All right. So, a bit of a sleepless night. I get up early. I drive to campus and knock on his door. And I was like, yeah, what's up? And he just looked at me and he said, why were you hitting those things so damn hard? I don't get it. I had a lesson shortly after that. I can't remember exactly where in the chronology of things, but he stopped me, whatever we were doing, and he hands me a triangle beater,
Mm-hmm.
and he points to a triangle, a mounted triangle, and all he said was, "Mezzo piano, you get one chance." So I go over, hit it, and he just shook his head. He goes, "Too loud. Get out." Again, he threw me out. So, what did I practice that time? I started working on touch. And so now I'm just trying to pay it forward when I work with students. It's, what kind of tone are you getting out of the practice pad? You know, I see I see a lot of drummers who have been taught or have somehow decided they're like warming up like that.
Mm-hmm.
Whoa, whoa. And and that's how I can hear my tone. That's how I can hear my execution. That's how I can, okay, the rhythm steadier. Right. Um, and that's a warm up. And one of my students once asked, well, how long should I do that for? And I told him, I said, if I was your Zen master or teacher, and we were in Japan in a bamboo grove, bubbling brook, I'd find the nearest newspaper, I'd roll it up as tight as I could, and I'd hit you as hard as I possibly could on the side of your head. And then, no, that's not how long. There's no, you don't punch the clock and pat yourself in the back. Oh, I did 10 minutes warm up. You can warm up for 1 or 2 minutes. You can warm up for 30 minutes. Gabriel used to tell me, he'd say, I walk the floor of where the percussion department is located. I see the students see me, so I know that they know that I know that they know, how much they're practicing. He said, they'll be in there 4 or 5 hours. He said, doesn't impress me. I don't care. He said, if you practice for 5 minutes and you accomplish something that you have not been able to do before that, he said, that impresses me. So he was instrumental in getting the practice monkey off my back, and yet, you'd have to be an idiot not to see the inverse of that. similarly or likewise, you may want to warm up. That hurt my hand when I demonstrated that. You may want to warm up for 20 minutes or more, because it's a benediction. It's a way of saying hello to your hands, to the instrument. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
for me, warming up there's a, sorry to use the word organic, but there's a very organic component to it, and it's not punching the clock. If you're, and that's why Gaber gave me warm ups that you can't do on automatic.
Gotcha.
They're very specific, because again, that when I would, as a kid, we talked about the Buddy Rich thing, and I would walk into drum shops and there'd be the guys, the practice pad on the counter, and they were always the guys that seemed to put the sticks in their back pocket,
Mm-hmm.
And I just felt I could never measure up to that, and it intimidated me, and it was like, that, I don't really know if that's, I don't hear drumming that way, So it was partly a defense, but it was also an instinct that there was something else going on.
And so it was 1976 when you finished your second round of college, that last year.
And then I got, so Maynard Ferguson called, and they called me 3 times. I turned them down 3 times. Then eventually I said, okay, I'll do a summer tour.
Well, why'd you turn them down?
Because I wanted to finish college.
Oh, because that was during.
Again. And then they finally said, look, you can just do the summer tour, and it ends on such and such a date, and then you can get back to Bloomington in time. That was the final day of registration, so I could register for classes. And first night we played in Chicago, and I knew I wasn't going back to school. Just too much fun playing with that rhythm section. When I went back to college, Gaber didn't want me to play in the jazz band, and so that may have backfired a little bit, because I was pretty hungry to get back to doing that. But I did learn a lot, and there was a lot of that stuff was the kind of stuff that I didn't even realize I'd learned it till 20, 30 years down the road.
Mm-hmm. And then so after that second round of college, a couple of years after is when you get picked up and you start playing with Weather Report, and you're on Mr. Gone, which has guys like Gadd and Williams on it. And then a year later, you're on 830, and you're the sole drummer. So what is it that, firstly, how did you meet the guys from Weather Report? And then what happens in that year between those 2 records where you become the exclusive drummer?
Well, I met Jocko when I was on Maynard Ferguson's band.
Okay.
And he heard me play, and he played us, meaning, me and a few of the other guys in the band, a cassette of Heavy Weather. They had just finished mixing it, and I remember telling Jocko that this is the version of the band I've been waiting for all these years. I loved the way, and I still do, the way that Alex Acuna and Manolo sounded with Jocko, and just the sound sparkled. It's an amazing record. Mm-hmm. But unbeknownst to me, Alex was making plans to leave the band. So they needed a drummer, and Weather Report called me up when I was on tour with Maynard, and I turned that down because it turned out it was going to be the first day of the Mr. Gone recording, and that was going to be my audition. And I just didn't have the confidence. I said, one day in the studio, renting drums, I got to tune them, I got to bump. It's a lot of pressure. No. And there was a lot of bad snowstorms. What if I can't get back in time for Maynard? He'll be hung up without a drummer. I can't do that to him. So I think Weather Report was a little bit impressed that I turned him down. Mm-hmm. And so they called me again, and I didn't turn him down a second time. So Gadd and Tony had already recorded on the album. And when I showed up, and had the first rehearsal, which, unbeknownst to me, was really like an audition. Obviously, if things hadn't gone well, they would have gone to some emergency plan B, but things did go well. And when I asked Zavino during a photo shoot the second day, hey, Joe, can I tell my friends I'm in the band, all the guys on Maynard's band? And he somewhat cryptically just said, you can tell your friends you're going to Japan. So at that point, they committed to taking me on tour to Japan. Mm-hmm. By the end of that tour, I was officially in the band. Uh, 8:30 was primarily a live album, but it also became one quarter of it became a studio album, thanks to a mistake an engineer made in erasing all 24 tracks of a crucial edit.
Oh, jeez.
Well, I'm glad it happened because we didn't have enough music for a double album, so the only way to justify a double album, because they didn't want to put out a single album,
Hmm.
that wasn't long enough, but we needed more material, so they said, well, we'll make one side studio. Who cares?
Yeah. Thank
And
God for that engineer then.
everything was thought of in terms of LP sides. Now with compact disc, you don't think that way, but I have a home movie from a Michael Stern recording session, and what my dad captured was Michael and I think Jim Beard were talking about. Well, if this is the third tune on the first side, Mike, each solo chorus is like 42 seconds, so add it up. Max, you could do three choruses.
Hmm.
And if a song was loud, you didn't want to put it at the end of the side for mastering, unless the album was short enough. I mean, and there was no moving things. I mean, it was all tape, and so um, when you listen to a Jeff Porcaro drum track and the incredible pocket, that guy, there's no computers. I mean, that's just these drummers played that way. They played perfectly. They got perfect takes.
Hmm.
So they really raised the bar. Um, and the rest of us mere mortals do the best we can. And now with Pro Tools, it's so much simpler.
Yeah.
You know, it's like people can appreciate. I was just reminiscing. I did a recording with Ileana Elias, and
Hmm.
it was at night, and I was replacing a drum track on one tune, and she said, "That's good, but I'd like you to do it again." And I said, "Do we have more tape?" No. I said, "If I do it again, we'll be recording over what I just did." Yeah. I said, "I'm really not comfortable doing that because I think it's a good take.
Hmm.
It's different than what you're expecting, but trust me, I know a good take when I hear one, and that's a good one. And I'll buy the tape. Let's get some more tape." Oh, they don't have any tape. I and I was very resistant about. I can't remember if I redid it or not. I begged her like just. And now with Pro Tools, you don't have to worry about that stuff.
That's true. You
You
can
know,
track forever as long as you have a big enough hard drive.
boom, create a new playlist. So it's fun, and that's what I do here in my studio now. And I just did a track for Ileani on Tuesday. It was so
D-
much fun.
Did you meet her through Steps Ahead when you moved back to the city?
When I moved to New York, after I'd been working there for a bit, I met her. I met her at a gig, and Eddie Gomez and I played on a demo recording she made, and he and I both approached Mike Minieri and Mike Brecker, but Mike Minieri was really kind of the leader, and we were the ones who said, you got to give her an audition or just bring her into the band. She's an incredible musician, and she is. She's an incredible player. Um, this this track was a lot of fun, and her husband now, Mark Johnson, he and I were like, uh, we worked together on so many projects
Hmm.
and travels and tours together, and the uh, the work process we had was uh, you know we would talk about the music we were playing. Can this be better? Why was it good tonight? Wow, that's great what they're doing, or that's dumb what they're doing. Why?
Hmm.
And so we had our own little bass drummer workshop. And to any musicians listening, it's okay to talk about music. We didn't plan, we didn't do tricks, but we talked about what we did, and we weren't defensive about it. We were quite open, and and that can be helpful. It's just like any kind of healthy relationship. It's good to be communicative.
Yeah. Here, I have a question, or this is a question that someone submitted in the live chat. This is from Ian Miller, who said, "Was there good camaraderie amongst?" I spoke that word awfully.
Camaraderie.
Amongst the members of Weather Report.
Oh yeah, very much. I mean, Joe Jocko and I, we were. I don't know if I have any photos here of us. Uh, well, that's. That's the wrong. There we go. That's when I first joined. We're listening to some music there together. Um, I've got some photos where you can really you get a. Give me a second. Let me just see if I can find this because we did it. We had a very good time together. Um, I'm looking weather report photos. Here's a couple. I mean, there we are on set. I mean, we're having a good time.
Yeah. Wow.
So, Jocko and I were roughly the same age. He was a couple of years older than me. I was 24. He was 26. And Joe and Wayne were like 48, 49. So, we were half their age.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a lot of fun. I mean, there were a lot of laughs. I learned a lot. We were the music could be athletic. The vibe could be pretty machismo at times, which was a combination of just their personalities as well as some old school kind of bebop stuff.
Yeah.
And it was a good environment to learn in. I somehow managed to establish a longevity record as having played drums for the longest time of any of the drummers who played in the band, and in part it was just because I would remind myself many times that I just thought, you know what, I don't know if I need this. I just go home.
Mm-hmm.
I would always remind myself, these guys know more about this than I do.
Yeah.
And so, therefore, pay attention. And I can. My wife snuck the door open. I think that was my lunch cue.
Well, I don't want to keep you late, but Peter, thank
you. My pleasure. I tend to talk a little bit too much, but you had mentioned an hour, so that's how we time things out here. I really appreciate the opportunity to appear on your show. If I can, let me just plug one thing here.
Do as many plugs as you need.
Just one. Pardon my forehead. This is a book I wrote with Dave Black. It's called The Musician's Lifeline.
Uh-huh.
And basically what I did, I put together 7 questions. And questions were like, what's the best advice you've ever received? Or what's the best advice you've ever given?
Mm-hmm.
What's the one thing you'd have done differently in your studies or your career? Blah, blah, blah. 7 questions plus some audition advice. I sent it out to 250 musicians. You can imagine I have a pretty good mail list. And of I know everyone that I send it to, mm-hmm. Or just about. And I got 165 detailed responses. It's a who's who of advice. And so it's a good fun read. I think you can get it in ebook format, or it's a fun book to have around. The Musician's Lifeline. It's got a good imaginative layout, very clever, good book. It's a lot of fun. And
where can you get physical copies?
Amazon. I mean,
hell yeah.
Here. Okay, Listen Without Judgment. That's from Carl Allen.
Mm-hmm.
Terry Lynn Carrington said, "The 4 agreements. Don't take anything personally. Don't make assumptions. Always do your best. And be impeccable with your word." Not just right there. I mean, that's hello. This is incredible life advice. So, if you don't mind, I thought I would mention that.
Absolutely.
And later today, I'll be videotaping some of my artistworks.com lesson responses. Everything's online these days, including my teaching at the University of Southern California. But I was already in that lane because of the work I've been doing at artistworks.com. So I appreciate the chance to get to speak with you, and stay well. Keep washing your hands, wearing that mask. I hope you get your shot soon.
Yeah, I'm hoping to. I don't have any really pre-existing conditions, so I'm going to be the last, but I'm hoping.
Well, in California, that's age 16 and up, and they're trying to go nationwide with this within a month or two.
I'm excited. Hell yeah.
Good for you. And if enough of us do it, we may be able to turn some kind of corner with all this. And I just want to wish everyone well. Okay.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you to everyone who listened. Thank you so much. And I'll see you all next time. Bye.
Wow.